What is up, everybody? Welcome to AK Plays. I'm AK. Let's play. Alright, everybody, so today I'm going to be doing a top 5 differences between good and bad players in the Division. Now, I'm not saying I'm the best player in the universe, and I'm definitely not saying that these are bad players in any of these clips. This is just footage in the background that I have left over. They're pretty interesting manhunts, and so I figured I'd put it back for something for you to look at. So I'm not making fun of anybody in these videos, and I'm not saying that I'm the best player in the world, but at the same time, I play so much that I have an understanding of what good players do and what bad players do. So basically this stemmed from a couple of days ago. Me and my team were running across the DZ, and we were looking for a solo manhunt that had just died because we wanted to pick him up to join our 3-man. We figured he'd be a solid 4th. And so we were looking for him, and we ran into a player who, we were rogue because we were just running across the DZ, and we're always rogue. And this guy started shooting at us, and one of my teammates says, "Hey, do you think that's a solo manhunt?" And then me and my other teammate both at the same time were like, "Nah, he doesn't play like that." And then I thought to myself, well, what does a solo manhunt play like? And I realized, okay, well, he probably does the things that good players do, and I kind of started to make a list in my mind right then. What do good players do that bad players don't do that kind of distinguish them when you run across them in the DZ, so you have to take them serious? And number 5, I would say, is accuracy. Now, this isn't something you directly see, but it's when you're fighting someone you notice. So the first thing with accuracy is a good player is going to be extremely accurate. They're not going to waste shots. They're not going to just hip fire. Well, sometimes you'll hip fire, but more than likely they're not going to just spray at somebody. They're not going to chase them with their gun, like firing. They're going to fire quickly, accurately, and be very efficient. Usually they're going to be aiming for head, upper torso, as opposed to bad players, which I hate saying bad players. I don't mean that in a negative way. It's more for the clickbait. People that aren't fully adept at the game. And so bad players, or people that aren't quite at the level of these other players, are going to be aiming for whatever shots they can. They're going to be basically just firing as much as possible and hoping that shots land. A good player is going to be very efficient. They're going to fire when they need to, and they're going to hit, I would say, 80 to 100% of their shots. I know 100% is unrealistic, but you're going to try to hit the vast majority of your shots as a good player. And a good player is going to be aiming to the head, upper torso, as I said before. A bad player might just straight up just shoot in the general direction of enemies and hope that it hits. But number 4 is decision making or strategy. Now, I find this important because a bad player may go and face tank a full 4-man team while they don't have stacks as a striker, or they might go and run into a group with turrets and just get shocked and set on fire. And a good player doesn't do that. A good player understands what they're supposed to do, the counters, and using funnels, using kind of a trap or an ambush scenario. And they understand the strategy of what they're doing. Nothing that you do when you're fighting is without purpose. So some strategy would be that you understand how this person's going to move, what build they're running, what they need to make that build succeed, and you're going to try to bait them into going into an area where you have a more advantageous position. You're going to try to pull them into, as you see where this clip is, I'm not saying we do this, but the construction site's right there. You might pull them in a construction site and shoot a few of those red barrels to blow up some explosions on them. You might pull somebody into an alleyway that you see over there and try to get a good funnel on them. Or in the different cases, as you see here, we're just fighting in the open because we're D3s and we have a final measure and we're not overwhelmed with numbers, so we know we can fight them just out in the open. But a good player is going to know the strategy, and they're going to know what decisions to make. If you see the enemy pop a survivor link or a blue and start charging you, you would react appropriately. And a bad player might not. They may just try to face tank somebody while they have a blue up and lose. And basically that's the difference. The difference is a good player is going to say, okay, we're going to use the stairs, we're going to use a funnel, we're going to fall back, we're going to push, we're going to pop an alt. And so the bad player is not going to comprehend all of that decision making, and they're going to make some poor decisions, which basically gets better with time as you play, and you'll learn. And definitely is more important on a team. But number 3 is gear. So everybody kind of saw this coming. It's a very obvious one, but I still want to talk about it because it's important. Gear. So now, a good player is obviously going to have fully optimized gear, they're going to have the build that they want, and they're going to know exactly how to run it. A bad player might be running around with one piece of this, one piece of that, some high ends, and a Thompson. But, not making fun of the Thompson, but we all know it's pretty bad. So, either way, a good player is going to have better gear than a bad player. Usually. Now, I'm not saying gear is everything. That's why this is number 3. There's definitely a way to overcome gear gap, which, I mean, you do that all the time, and I mean, I tried to do that the other day running a pistol build. Occasionally you'll run a hexo build just for fun. A good player can use most builds and still do very, very well. That's why this is number 3 on the list, but at the same time it's very important to mention because gear gap does exist, and everyone kind of knows it in the back of their heads. Some people, like an optimized striker that knows how to play, is going to beat a hexo that doesn't know how to play 10 out of 10 times. But that's why it's important. Now, on to number 2. Now, number 2 is movement. Now, movement is, I was deciding this was going to be number 1 or number 2 because movement is so important. Obviously, in these clips, I'm D3, so I'm not really going to be moving much, but I would assume most of you know what I'm talking about when I say movement. Movement is, first of all, taking into consideration you have the decision making to know when to strafe and move and go back and forth. Movement is the ability to move. Now, duh, I know, but basically your strafe, your shifting left to right, your face tanking, but you're not face tanking while standing still. You're going to be shifting left to right and kind of doing that shimmy so people can't aim directly at you and just have a straight face tank, which a lot of people don't do, even good players. They don't realize that, is that when you're doing a face tank, you don't want to just leave your character standing still and shooting. You're supposed to be going a little bit left to right or floating one direction, but going back and forth is obviously the better strategy. But movement is extremely important because if the enemy isn't hitting you, then you have time to wait for buffs, to wait for heals, to make them lose stacks, to get in a better position, because all of this relies on movement. You might have all the decision making, all the gear, everything you need, but if you can't move, you're probably going to lose. Basically, bad players will take cover and they won't move. They'll stand up and they'll just not move and try to face tank you, and that's not going to work. A good player is, I would say 95% of the time, is not going to be taking cover. They're going to be out strafing, they're going to be moving left to right, they're going to be making shimmy steps left to right, they're going to be face tanking by going left to right. Movement is key in this game, and if you don't move correctly, I'm not saying you have to have a crazy computer strafe, but just moderate strafe. Number 1 is game knowledge, though. And game knowledge is huge. Game knowledge is probably 80% of the battle. Now, if you play a lot, you're going to have game knowledge, and that might overcome somebody who is a traditionally better player, somebody with accuracy and good reaction time, good decision making. If you know the map, you know the gear sets, and you know how to counter every gear set, then you're going to probably be able to beat someone who is skillful in the game but doesn't understand it. Now, this is an RPG looter shooter that is going to be a little more complicated than a straightforward game like Call of Duty where you pick a class, shoot some people. And a lot of people don't get that when they come to this game at first, and it takes sometimes years. I mean, it took me forever to learn all of the nuance of the game, and once you do, though, it's amazing. I mean, people just don't comprehend what's going on, and that's why a lot of people that play this game that are really good players get messages every day that say you're cheating, you're hacking, you're glitching, you're using Cronus, you're using aimbot, you're using God mode, and I think it stems all from game knowledge, because that person might not understand that you have 9k stam striker, 100 stacks with critical save and on the move procced. You're not running God mode, your build's just super duper tanky, and you have everything procced to make it even more tanky at the moment. That's also, I've run into people that don't understand how D3 works, and they'll be shooting the shield, and they'll be like, that's invincible, it's you're cheating. Or somebody last patch was using Predmark against me and my teammate, and we had a final measure and a D3, and final measure with its EDR plus the D3 buff. He was like, why is my Predator's Mark not hurting you? And it's all game knowledge. If those people understood the procs and they understood final measure, the EDR, and the health buff that you're getting from the shield, plus the buffs here and the buffs there, that's one thing that I think is huge in this game, game knowledge. So if you have game knowledge, you're going to be extremely strong. You're going to understand how every buff works, how every counter works, what every gear set doesn't want you to do. You know that when you're fighting a striker, you need to strafe and get their stacks away. When you're fighting a D3, you can stack up on that shield if you're a striker, and if you want to counter it, you can run a tactician sticky. But that's it for the game knowledge. Now, I just gave you a summary of the top 5: game knowledge, movement, gear, decision-making, strategy, and accuracy. And I think that that is the top 5 differences between good and bad players in the division. Now, obviously, I think that there's a ton of other things that are involved in this, but if you agree with me, if you disagree, if you have any questions about what I'm saying, put it in the comments section, and I hope you enjoyed.